Hello. Hello. Hey, and welcome back to Culture Stigma, Black Women and Mental Health. We're truly excited and so blessed to be able to sit here again and have a part two of our conversation that we had in March. This event is hosted by the African Student Union at the University of Bergen and also collaborated with Meeting of the Minds and the Literature House. Welcome.
Yeah. So on the previous episode of Mental Health and Black Women, we discussed the general perceptions and ideas on what mental health is and why there is a lot of stigma around the theme in the Black community and what causes mental health issues amongst Black women and how we can invest in our mental health. And on this episode, we will be discussing more about the same topic, just in depth, as we build on the previous one. And as you guys can see in the background, we will be receiving questions during the panel. So you guys can just print the QR code and send your questions. We will be seeing them here and picking some questions during the panel. And then at the end of the conversation, we will be going through some of the questions too.
Yeah.
Yes. So we will be soon starting with our panel, but first, let's just introduce our ladies.
Yeah. Okay, so we have some new faces and also some old ones from the previous conversation. We're going to start with the ones that have been here before, which is, of course, Anine Bråten from half Gambian and half Norwegian. We also have Dora Poniloro from South Sudan. And the new ones are Rifilwe Precious Jeremiah from Botswana, Numsebo Kumalo from Swaziland, and also Fungisai Otamerla from Zimbabwe. Welcome.
Welcome. So thank you, ladies, for being here, making time to be here and to be a part of the panel. So we'll just open the panel. It's a question. The first question is for everybody. And here it comes. Can someone be having mental health issue without being aware of it? Bufil, where do you want to start?
Okay, I'll take it. Yeah, a lot of people do have mental issues and they're not aware of it. Because first of all, everybody goes through a bit of stress. And a bit of stress is good to push somebody to accomplish their daily activities and everything like that. However, when now somebody is not able to accomplish their daily activities on time, they feel too tired, they feel excessive, maybe they want to sleep more. They could be going through some mental health phase or some issue without them being aware of it. And sometimes it takes somebody to shake you off to say, hey, I think you have a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I would say most people, actually, who probably deal with mental health issues are undiagnosed or probably not aware of it because everyone has a mental health. And I would say that most people that I meet have issues. Okay, let's be real. Please show me a person without issues, okay? I would say that most people probably don't know that they do deal with things, even when it's serious. You know, I think that, for instance, depression can be seen as just, oh, I'm really sad all the time, or really angry, right? So, or anxiety can be, oh, I'm just stressed all the time. So I think a lot of it goes unrecognized because we don't necessarily talk enough about it. So obviously you're not supposed to symptomize everything and make everything into an illness. That's not good either. But I do think that most people who suffer from some issues probably don't know that they do.
Yeah.
Good.
That's good.
I would say it's true that for the most part we are not aware. It's an awareness issue, and also naming things what they are. If I don't know what I'm feeling, I'm going to give it a different name. So I'll say I feel tired, or I feel anxious, or I just feel annoyed. I'm just an annoyed person. Or instead, you are not aware that you need to dig into that feeling and find where it's coming from. Because if you don't know where something is coming from, that fatigueness, where it's coming from, then you're not going to be able to explore the roots of it, and then you're not going to be able to diagnose it or to give it the correct name. And then we're just going to say, I'm going to sleep it off, when in fact you have a mental issue, like your mental health is not totally balanced. Yeah.
True. Dora?
Yes. No, I'll just add to what has been already said. I think, many of us might have, mental health issues, but being unaware of it is one thing, but also denying it, being in denial, that maybe not wanting to name it as a mental health problem. That also kind of suppresses the feeling, and if, like as you said, Rabilze, that you might not be able to do your daily course, you are not presenting yourself as you usually do, you feel something is not right, but again, if you don't have the knowledge about mental health, then you won't name it as mental health problem and you won't seek the help. But then again, there's also this thing we talked about the other time about the stigma, but maybe you would think maybe it's a mental health issue, but again, because of the stigma, you will live in denial, not wanting to seek help, not want to be aware of it either. So I think it's all these aspects playing into it.
Yeah.
I agree. I think a lot of times it manifests in your body. So it's bodily aches, bodily pains that you feel, like Refilwe says. So you go to the doctor and you say, I have headaches, or I have backache, or whatever ache that you have, and you keep coming back. But the issue is really about not the mental health, but what the mental health problem, but what is causing it. So you may be, in denial because there is a problem in your life that is manifesting, and because you're blocking that problem, it's then coming out as an ache in your body. So I think that is probably the most common thing, is that there's something that's bothering us, something that's out there in our lives that we don't really want to face, and as we avoid it, it then, the body will show you. The body will show you what's wrong, but it may manifest as a physical ailment. And if you don't have that awareness of, I realize there's this issue that's bothering me, then you will just continue to see it as, I'm suffering from constant headaches, but it's not really the headache. There's something else outside that you need to deal with. So, I think a lot of the time, because of lack of awareness, we do go around feeling aches and pains and not really looking beneath the physical to see that could there be something else that's coming from the mind or the psyche.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
That's very good.
Yeah, you want to add on that?
Yeah. To break it down and take it home in an African context or in a Black context, sometimes we even spiritualize mental health. We will say, oh, no, I'm going through, they'll even say you got demons. And so it's something that we would rather, in a Black community, we would rather take it spiritually than actually address it mentally. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. And also the thing is that some people might be aware of it, but it also might tend to draw away from it, right? They might tend to lean towards other things that might suppress those emotions. And those things can be substances, it can be overworking yourself, or just over-socializing yourself, overstimulating yourself, right? Or maybe just maybe using alcohol as a way of getting away from those emotions. So we know that you have written your master thesis on mental health when it comes to using substances as a way of getting away of those emotions. So could you speak on that?
Yeah, one of my research areas is alcohol and substance use. I look into it in a broader context, and right now for my PhD, I'm looking into experiences of adult children of alcoholics. These are the people who are now adults, but they grew up in homes where alcohol was abused. So I'm looking into how did they turn up in their adult life? Are they now using like their parents, or they manage to build what we call resilience, that they are different? And like you were saying, we usually, in alcohol and substance use and mental health, we sometimes as practitioners face what we say concurrent disorders, where a person got mental health like schizophrenia, it causes hallucinations, and then the person is using marijuana, which also causes hallucinations. So there, when a person comes for help, you don't know what came first. Is it the chicken or the egg? Yeah.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
good.
very interesting. Yeah, and you guys were into that though. And Nami were saying about living in denial, people knowing what they have, but then living in denial. But then it's the others were saying too that not being aware of it, taking that I'm just having a bad day, right? So now that we're discussing about that, if we're gonna draw a fine line between having a bad day and having a mental issue, how would it be? How would that line be? Anina?
I would just say that, I mean, obviously I'm not the expert here, but in psychiatry, it's basically like when it's something is so, it's affecting your life so much that it's actually becoming a literal problem. That's when you need to address it, because everyone can have a bad day. Everyone can be angry. Everyone can be sad. Everyone can be stressed, sure. When it becomes a continuous issue and is not really, going away by itself, it's probably something you should look into. But because it's the difference between having just a bad day and then it becomes weeks and then it becomes months and, and if it's really, really affecting your life and your ability to live your life, that's when you really need to look into it. Yeah.
Good.
Dora?
Yeah. I would agree with her. And I think it's as she said, everyone has a bad day, sometimes in between, but if you have a bad day, 24 hours, 7 days a week, every month, then it's a problem. And the thing here is, it's also the persistence of the bad day that you're having, and also how much of that affects your everyday life. It's like I work with young people, and then you see it's like mapping them out, seeing that if, maybe a day or two, they haven't been sleeping well because of the traumatic experiences that they're having. But if this continues over time, affects them from going to school, and then they start eating less, or they start eating much, because then it becomes a mental health problem that needs attention and needs some help. So we should really separate between a bad day that we all have in between, but then when it persists, then it's something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Same thing, really. I think we all say the same thing. Continuum. You have, on the one end, you have when you're healthy and everything is fine, and then, there is this continuum, and you can have your bad days, but then when it gets severe, so it's the severity, basically, when it becomes debilitating, when you can no longer really function.
Yes.
Then really you have a problem. So I think, I think it's the severity that we look at.
It's called,
Yeah, but
I was going to say,
Yeah,
it's
it
called
just, a thought
disorder
just,
for a reason.
a thought just crossed my mind. But then that one bad day, if it's you been hit on the way home by someone, because, I don't know, it could be a blind violence, someone just come by and hit you, and it caused you a traumatic experience that will change your life for good. So it could be it depends on what bad day it is. If it's just a bad day, like maybe just been stressed by something little, is something else. But if it's a traumatic experience on that one day, that you would carry it for your whole life, that's also different, I would say.
Very good. Yeah. Anina?
I think we kind of live in a kind of like a paradoxical time as well, because I've never seen so much being pathologized before. Like everything is pathologized now. Like everything is a disorder. Oh, I have a water drinking disorder. No, it's called surviving. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it's called thirst. You know what I mean? Like it's like everything. You can class like disorder attached to everything now, and people put it in their bios, and that's good. We can talk about mental health. But then also at the same time, it's so stigmatized. It's so stigmatized, even though it's so ironic because your mental health comes from your brain. Your brain is a physical thing in your body, is biological. So, and more and more research shows that the interaction between your actual gut and your brain also has something to do with how you feel. So it's a very physical thing that because we don't see it, we don't necessarily understand it that well, and we have a tendency of kind of demonizing things we don't understand. That's a very human trait to do. But it's so interesting how we can understand how someone can have a physical illness and that not all physical illnesses are, made the same. But the moment something is a mental illness, it's just automatically crazy, or someone is unstable. Just like there are different physical illnesses, I mean, diabetes and some other disease is not the same. You know what I mean? And ADHD and depression is not necessarily the same. There's so many different ways to experience mental health and mental illness. So just because something is mental illness does not mean that you are no longer a functioning person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
So then, with what you just said, Anina, that today, especially in the Western world, there are all these kinds of diagnoses that some I'd never heard of before, and something is a thing. Is that a thing? Yeah, that's a thing. And from the African perspective or the African experience, for example, let's say postpartum depression. It's like, what is wrong with women today? I have had 12 children. What are you going to tell me about postpartum depression? You understand? So it's like, sometimes it's a struggle of how do we accept that this thing is a problem that is so common for everyone else? And then to me, it's a problem now. When did you discover that that is a problem now? And how do I begin talking about it, and to whom? Because if I'm surrounded by the same community that I am from, no one is going to hear me. And if I say that, then yeah, you are crazy. And so how do I get through it?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I think
Philly?
it starts first with awareness. Awareness, and then also educating people about some of these issues. Like as she's saying, my grandmother will say, I had 12 kids. My mother will say, I had 4 kids. And how come you just had one and you claim you have? You are not coping. And especially with the expectation that as a black woman, I'm supposed to go to sail through it. Smooth sailing. It's an expectation that I have to be a mother when I'm a woman. So I believe it takes education to just show them, to say, things have changed, and even our family setup have changed. Our parents grew up with so much strong extended family that as we are much into nuclear family, that when issues happened, sometimes I cannot access and be open to my mother. It was going to be easy when I talk to my aunt. And my aunt may bring a different perspective that my mother does not bring in, and the support and how things are done. And nowadays, with where we are now not only surrounded being just a mother, we have other roles that we are carrying as well. So it takes awareness, and it takes it takes to show our families to say, but this is what I'm going through. And if I'm not able to be given enough assistance going through this, I will not be able to function even after being a nurturing mother. Yeah. Because I am so happy you brought it up because it's so common now. I don't think it's common, it wasn't there before, it's only that now we are aware of it. And now we have a name for it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fungisa?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because we talk about how we as Africans or our African cultures need to be educated, to be made aware. Should we think of why we are the way we are now? Should we not consider what has happened to us as a people and the role, for example, of colonialism? Because I often think that we have lost a lot of knowledge that we had before because what we knew and how we did things was demonized.
True.
We were made to be uncivilized, to not know anything. And we did have ways of dealing with things because these things, a lot of these things existed. A lot of these things have arisen because of the conditions in which we live in now and because of how our cultures were completely, a lot of our cultures, a lot of our ways were taken away and were destroyed and were distorted. So I think we also need to keep that in mind, is that who are we? And what have we lost?
Yeah.
And not just subscribe to the Western way of thinking and the Western diagnoses.
Yes.
So I think we need to kind of bring this a little bit into our conversation. I know it maybe sounds a little bit far out, but I really think it's a very important aspect for us to be aware of. And to not just jump on the bandwagon of all these diagnoses, but also to think, where do we come from and who are we and what did we know?
Definitely. Yeah, we totally agree with what you just said, Fungisa, and everybody, of course. And we will definitely come to that point as a question. So now, to build the conversation, we have another question. And that's now that we're talking about, we started with having to draw that fine line between a bad day and having a mental issue. And now we're going to have to talk about mental condition. So would one of you say what a mental condition is? And then talk about the mental conditions that we often see dominating amongst Black women and why. Dora.
I wouldn't know how to.
You're an
I wouldn't know
expert,
how to. If there is a scientific background to that, a mental condition or mental conditioning. I know from my experience that for the Black woman, she is pretty much conditioned to that, what we call then a status quo of the Black woman, which in fact is not really who she is. She was made or she was built or conditioned to be so. And I think it was talked about in the last talk on the picture or the ideal of the strong Black woman. So if you are not that, then something is wrong with you. Something is broken in you. You are malfunctioning. So if you need help or if you ask for help for something so simple, then you are weak. So then you have to, when you come to that awareness of what is actually normal for me or for my mental health, is it normal for me to believe or is it normal for me to accept that what are the stereotypes of strong Black women? Is it normal for me to accept, for example, abuse? Do I have to be strong for that? Where do I draw the line between different experiences of being strong and also helping someone abuse me, right? So it becomes, even that questioning or even that awareness by itself becomes a problem, because you have to question everything you have been conditioned to believe or to accept or to know up to that point. And once you question it at that moment, then you have to unravel everything that, or it unravels everything that you have been through, and everything comes flooding to you. So it's almost like you opt to keep that door closed, just so the goblins wouldn't come at you, if I can put it that way. So I don't know if I answer your question, mental condition. I understand it's mental conditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amina?
I don't necessarily know the data or the statistics for what specific conditions affect Black women mostly, but I do know that when you look at the Black population, even in America, that you see a higher prevalency of PTSD, which
Yes.
makes sense, right? And also the fact, I think I mentioned this the last time in the last panel, how the racism and the oppression that Black people experience literally makes them ill. It makes them sick. So we suffer more from like heart conditions and other conditions associated with stress and earlier deaths. So it literally has an effect on you and your health, not just mentally, but your physical health, because they're so connected. And I think if you look at it from that, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that the Black woman would be even more affected, because you have the intersection of not just being Black, but you're also female. So if just the part of being Black alone, it can be such has such an effect, a severe effect on your mental health in a white supremacist kind of world. And obviously, if you have the patriarchy on top of that as well, and then you have the expected loyalty that Black women have to, their community as well. So if we do experience abuse, and if we experience abuse from our, brothers, then we can often feel like we have to battle between being a woman and being Black. Should I actually speak about this and then kind of help perpetuate like the negative stereotypes of Black men? Or should I actually, just be quiet and loyal to the Black community? I see this a lot with a lot of Black women, that they feel this sort of like they're torn because of this. Because it's just like Malcolm X said, the Black woman is the least protected. And that will also make you the most affected.
True.
Yeah.
Dora?
Yeah, just adding another layer to what you already said. Yeah, I think also in addition to having the PSTD, that maybe the majority of people of minority backgrounds might have, and Black women also, based on the traumatic experiences that different people might have experienced also. We have also depression, that's also common. We have also suicidal thoughts that might come in between. And these are also, we should look also at the socio-economic context, because we see, like, if I take the context of Norway and taking minority women, where Black also is represented there, we see that the socio-economic background of many Black women, or many Black African, or I would say Asian or minority women, this also affects them in times like when we consider unemployment, for instance, right? There is high rate of unemployment, people with high qualifications that are not in the job market. And this also is a stressor, in everyday life. It causes you stress, and then it also builds up into depression. And with depression also comes affecting your role. If you're a parent and it affects your role as a parent, then you won't be able to be the parent that your children need. So it kind of plays out in many different ways. And having also traumatic experiences, whether it's an experience of war, coming from a war-torn country and moving to a peaceful country like Norway, but then having those experiences that play out into PSTD. And then also having, you might have experienced a troublesome childhood with neglect and all these things that will also, being an adult, either after having lived in a family with drug abuse or even child neglect, all these things also affect us later in life. So we see that there are different types of mental illness, and again, how we also, you say the mental conditioning also affect us in our experience of how we experience our mental illness.
True. Tfingisay?
Yeah, Thanks. I think I agree with the points that have been made, and what Dora points out is the whole intersectionality, where you're black, you're poor, you're a woman, and you have all the different layers. But I'd also like to challenge us to look at it from a different perspective, because, for example, Anina, when we were talking about the statistics, what are these statistics based on? If they're based on African American, are we all African Americans? So when we talk about the black woman, we are essentializing. We are not one thing. We are not an entity.
Yeah.
We have lots of different backgrounds, lots of different cultures, lots of different experiences. Are we talking about us as black women living in the West, or are we also considering our black sisters on the continent? Because if we look at the large number, the majority of us are on the continent, having different experiences, and we can't speak to their experiences, with what we're saying here. So I think we always have to be a little bit nuanced in our discussion and not just do what usually we hate being done to us, right?
Yes.
Africa is a country. No, it's not.
It's not.
The black woman is not one thing.
Yeah.
And it's very important that we remember that. And my research focuses on what strengths we have. So I'm always going to come in from that perspective. So when I hear, I know these are realities, the PTSD, the depression, the abuse, but we are more than that. So, sorry, I'm going to keep disrupting this.
Okay, Anina, and then
Yeah.
we'll jump to the...
No, I just want to say that's exactly why I specified that it was African Americans, because I know that we're not a monolith. So I needed it to be very specific, that's where the statistics were from. But also, I completely agree with you. There are so many incredible things about being a black woman. I mean, hello. Hello. But okay. But I also think that I think it's such a hard issue to broach because of the stereotype, like the strong black woman, right? So it's like it's almost like you can't win in a sense, because you're either the strong black woman or you're like this tragic black woman.
Tragic, yeah.
So there's no in between. I am strong, and I'm also I've gone through a lot of tragic stuff. You know what I mean? And some of it is related to being a black woman, very specifically. I mean, I can sit here and I can talk about, I have a lot of different things that I deal with, but I do know very specifically the things that I deal with that are directly connected to the racism that I've experienced or the misogynoir that I've experienced, right? And those are truly things that we need to talk about. And I especially think that if we're talking about different contexts, I think that here in Bergen specifically, because I feel like this is a conversation we don't have enough, then this is really the time and the place to be like, you know what? This is what's happening. We're experiencing these and these things. So that's why I don't mind being the one screaming from the back. No, it's really fucking hard. Sorry, to be a black woman here specifically.
Yeah.
Contextually, yeah.
So the point of the question was, as the event is in itself, it's like cultural stigmatized.
Yeah.
It's a mental health topic, right? So sometimes it feels like if you're black and women, you're not allowed to be depressed because you're strong, right? Because who in your family has ever been depressed? So why would you be depressed, right? So the point of the question was to attack this kind of mindsets that there are PTSDs amongst black women, there is depression, there is anxiety.
Yeah.
There are many black women who are sleepless.
Yeah.
So it's like to expose this kind of things. And we do definitely agree with what you said from your side, that there is another perspective of it too that keeps on bringing strength. Yeah.
Well, you're right about the stigma. Trust me, I could never have had a conversation with my father about mental health. Are you serious? I literally had a conversation, I think yesterday, where I was just mentioning the fact that, okay, Titanic is one of my favorite movies. I saw it when I was a kid, and I was sitting there in the cinema. You know, when you have like the dark and the light from the cinema, and I was seeing my father sitting right there, my African father, and I was crying, and I was just looking at my father for sympathy, and he was like, girl, so fuck is this? You really crying about this? I'll show you something to cry about.
Yeah.
But you know, like, it's like, and I was just like 11 years old, like, it's dying. You know.
Yeah.
So there's both like the generational differences.
Yeah, for sure.
The generational I'm a millennial, like the generational differences, the sex differences, like the sex roles, right? And also like in cultural differences. I mean, I was born and raised here, you know what I mean? And my father is probably like, what the hell are you crying about? Like, you know, so, and I can promise you, if I ever were to talk about my father about mental health, woo, that would be a short conversation. That would be a very short conversation. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, so Dora, I heard that you mentioned, traumatic experience and stuff like that. And the thing is, trauma is a term that, we often use. And trauma can be a way of our whole identity, because that's the only thing we know, is like a self-mechanism of something that we've experienced, right? So how do we define what trauma is? And what are the patterns to look at or to look for when we are, talking about trauma? Because I feel like a lot of people just use trauma out of nowhere. Oh, this is traumatic. Oh, trauma. So, let's just define that, and then, yeah.
Is that?
Well, I think as Fungisai said, it feels weird to say that. Sis Fungi said, we are a lot of things. Just as an individual, you are a lot of things. I am not my trauma. And also the trauma, even in your own self, it's not in every part of you. It's in certain parts of you or certain parts of your experiences. It's not spread across like, oh, I'm traumatized by everything. That I'm not saying that that's not possible. Some people really have had hard times that everything about them has something traumatic. But it's also, or at least for me, a method that works is to keep track of how I feel in different circumstances around different people, and zeroing in, say, if someone is making me feel irky, why are they making me feel that way? But it took me a long time to even get to even question feelings that I have. Before it would just be like, I don't like them. But now it's why, what is it about them that makes me feel some type of way? And then you realize when you map, or when I map the why going back, then it's linked to one experience somewhere, even if it was one, even if it was multiple, somewhere when I was 8, or somewhere when I was 15, or somewhere when I was last year, or whatever. But my point is, we are a lot of things, as Sis Fungi said, and it's important to also, with the trauma, to avoid it being a buzzword, because then we will have conversations that are meaningless. To put it where it belongs, same as our emotions, to put them where they belong, so we can be able to diagnose them correctly in the correct context within the correct parameters. Yeah.
Dora?
Yeah, I think trauma is a deeply distressing or deeply disturbing event or experience that someone has. It could be being in a car accident with someone that you loved and you lose that someone. And that's a traumatic experience that you would live with a long time after. And it could be also, like I mentioned, being knocked on the street while you're walking, someone just came by and knocked you, blind violence, or if you lose a child or have some really disturbing experience that you've had.
Yes.
For some people, it would take maybe a year, a month, and they will get over it. But for others, it might take many or a lifetime. And after that, that's where you get the PSTD. It comes after, because it's post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Comes after a trauma that one has experienced. And with that, you need help to be able to treat the symptoms, to be able to treat the feelings and work on that. And for others, you would need maybe medication and really medical help to do that. And with traumas also, it gets triggered with, if you, for instance, a child that has been abused and in the house, maybe there was abused or driven away with a red car. Whenever the child sees a red car, he starts crying. He starts the trauma, it gets reactivated. And that's how also our traumas get reactivated, because it's there in the brain, it gets triggered out with the experiences that we live every day. So the traumas that we have depends on also the level and how hard, how tough it is. It gets activated in between. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Refilli, we're going to say something?
I think they've already mentioned a lot. And just to add on that, what's important is that it takes us back to the other question when it was mentioned to say, can somebody be aware of their mental health? Some people live with trauma that they don't know that is embedded in them. And sometimes it will take a trigger that a person will burst out and not knowing. Like, for instance, in case somebody was abused when they are young, and now they're older and probably they're married, sometimes the spouse can do something that will take that person right to that incident, as she talked about mapping. And the person will just burst. And the poor partner will not know, oh, what have I really done wrong? So sometimes it's not about the current incident as it has been discussed, but to what really triggered the trauma that will take the person right to that particular incident. And that is why it's important that we need to address our traumas. Sometimes we can try to live with them, but then it's also important for us to be aware of our traumas. If I grew up in a particular environment that has affected me, I have to be able to be aware to say, oh, and make my partner aware, if it's a partner or a friend, to say, you know what, I get triggered by this. So that we can be able to work with it together when those incidences happen.
True.
Yeah.
Anina?
I was going to say, I think it's important to remember from a psychological perspective that usually when you have these disorders that are basically responses to trauma or something that you've experienced maybe in your childhood or in your life, they can usually be useful for a shorter period of time. If you grew up in an abusive household and you start becoming controlling of your environment, blah, 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 because you're growing up in a chaotic environment, that's useful. But when you get out of that context and you're still in a need of control all the time, it becomes maladaptive. So a lot of people that we meet in life, they carry with them all their past experiences, and they're shaped by that. And like she said, and a lot of people said here, is that often you don't recognize your own patterns. You don't recognize why you're necessarily responding the way that you're responding, and when those responses are maladaptive and no longer conducive to good relationships or survival, because it usually is about survival. And that's when we need to start recognizing the issue and then try to address them. Preferably with a professional, because doing it yourself can go really wrong. But trying to address them so that you can have a healthy constructive life because it becomes destructive when we go into relationships and all kinds of relationships, whether it's with friends, coworkers, partners, your future children, because it can be generational as well.
Yeah.
How many times have we not seen this? It goes in generations, you know, we need to address it. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
We'll get back to that, actually,
Yeah.
the solution part.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was just, now when you guys were talking about, when you were ladies were talking about this, I'm just sitting here and thinking about what most of holistic doctors would say, that don't treat only the symptom, but think about what is causing the symptom, right? So when I think about trauma, I think the same way that trauma isn't that you're with somebody and somebody's triggering something in you, but it's something that has happened way, way back, as Nam was saying, that needs to be treated there, you know? So trauma is just like an alarm telling you that, oh, or something happened that reminds you of that is triggering you. So, yeah.
Yeah, but how do
Preferably
we...
to think.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Preferably to think, that our traumas are always the lead to trace what's actually wrong that I need to work on. And I think you guys did very well on talking how to trace it, and as you said, to preferably doing it with a therapist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my next question is that now, when we talk about trauma, what we associate is, as we were saying, hurt, right? Something bad. Now, I'm going to go back to you, Fungisai, that how can we, is there any ways to use our trauma for our benefit or to make them as a resource?
Yes, you can always turn your difficulties into strengths. When we think about trauma, we immediately think about, like what you guys said, the maladaptive behavior, or the difficulties and the pain that come with it. But I think within that is a learning experience. Within that is an opportunity to learn something. No matter how horrific it may be, there is always something that you can turn around. Because I think if you think, for example, survivors of the Holocaust, the ones that are forgiving and, living lives after that horror, which we can't imagine, how did they manage to then come and live, like what you said, sort of normal, productive lives? Yes, I think they still had the horror, but somehow they managed to turn it around and say, I did suffer this, I was treated, in this way by these people. I did go through this trauma, but somehow my life is more than that, and I'm going to take my life forward, because if I just give in to what happened to me, if I just give in to what those people did to me, then they have totally defeated me. So I think it's I can't say how it would be, but I think it is a kind of a way of turning through working with yourself, through working with a therapist. It's a way of turning that horrible experience, seeing that it was, and I am here now, and I have survived it, and I am alive, and now how do I go forward? Rather than staying in that situation, staying in that pain, in that horror. You have to make that choice, and it's not easy, but I think doing that, you come out so much stronger.
True. Yeah.
It also goes to what we call resilience. With resilience, we are saying these are the people who thrive in difficulties. And sometimes people go through a lot of issues, like Fungi has said, but they come up stronger. Some come up stronger without even going to a therapist. Take, for instance, back home, where sometimes this is a child who grew up in so much poverty, and this will be the rising star in that family. This will be the rising star whom at the end this child excel even beyond the circumstances that this child has grew up in. And sometimes it takes maybe that child having somebody who believes in them. And that is why I personally, I'm a mentor. I like to to hold somebody by a hand, because we have to acknowledge that every person gets strengths in them. Sometimes they get clogged up by the circumstances. They just need somebody to hold by the hand to say, you can do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
True.
Dora and Amina.
I'm personally not religious, so when I hear about trauma and someone's response is, everything happens for a reason, I don't like that at all. I don't think that everything happens for a reason. I also think that one should be very careful with painting something that is really horrific and traumatic as something that happened to you for a reason. Well, you can find your reason in it. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference. So it didn't necessarily happen to you for a reason, but you can find your reason to fight, to live. You know what I mean? Like, you can find your reason. I'm a person who comes from trauma. I've experienced a lot of trauma in my life, but that has become a part of me, and it has shaped me into making me an activist. This is why I study law. This is why I study psychology. This is why I want to fight for human rights. This is why I want to fight for women. This is why I want to fight for people of color. This is why I want to fight for Black people. So it didn't happen because this is a good thing that happened to me, but I made it into something good for myself and for others. There's the difference.
Yeah.
Very good. Dora?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that turning of traumatic experiences into something, I don't want to turn positive, but people who have experienced traumatic experiences that are being used now as, like in Bergen here, we have erfaringskonsulenter, like people that are using the experiences to help others go through their own traumatic experiences.
Yes.
So it's not that by choice, but then, of course, after a tough time walking through the traumatic experience and getting the help they need, so they've come to a stage where they can help others. So in that sense, we look at it that, okay, now they've come across the troubles, they've come across and gotten some help, now they can help others. So in that way, we can look at it as a positive thing.
Yeah.
Very good.
Indeed.
I was talking to a young man, and he is from Iraq, and he shared his story, and the horrific, his mother was killed in front of him, stuff that many of us have not experienced. But he was standing there. He's here in Norway. He's a medical student. He's doing brilliantly. He speaks fluent Norwegian. He's just everywhere. And what he said was that all these things happened to me, and I'm still experiencing the trauma, but I'm still living my life. I'm still out there. I'm still, like what Refilwe said, I'm still reaching out and holding others by hand. I'm encouraging people. I am finding the resources despite the pain that's still there, despite the fact that I still have nightmares. So it's not like it's completely gone, and this will probably take, many, many years for it to recede. But he says, I keep going, and I smile, and, I keep working, and I keep building myself, and I keep gathering my resources. But that does not mean that I don't have the trauma. So it's not an either-or.
Yeah.
I think this is what we need to remember. It's not like, you've got your trauma, you need to get healed, then you'll be okay. You've got your trauma, but you can still live your life,
Indeed.
The audience is wow. Number 7.
Yes, I think we are all saying the same thing. I'm going to say the same thing. So, in that we don't invite trauma. We do not wish trauma on people. Some people thrive out of it, or they get the help they need. Some do not. So it becomes a human condition that we are all still trying to understand and trying to address, hence this conversation today. However, I will also allude to the same thing that, say, for example, it may not be the first hand of the experience that is giving you trauma. It may be an experience that is triggering you in a certain way. And having done the work, or having been aware of what trauma is and your emotions and your feelings, you are able, or you can be able, though it is hard, to decide in this moment that is triggering you in some shape or form that I will not have the same experience I had the first time I went through this. If it's an experience, for example, that makes you angry, or that is frustrating to you, or that is leaving you feeling helpless in some form, you can, with the help again, because we do need a community, a friend, someone who understands, you can be able to say, I am going to feel these emotions. I'm not going to negotiate myself away from them. I'm going to feel them, but this time not in vain or not from a helpless point, but I'm going to direct them at something that I want to accomplish. If I feel insanely mad, but then again, I'm aware that in this present moment, I'm a bit helpless, how can I make myself not helpless? How can I empower myself such that when such a thing happens again, because you know it's going to happen again, I'm in a different position. You channel that experience into making yourself better. And it's in that sense where you can say in retrospect, I needed that experience or that trigger to fire my behind in a way, or to get me off, or to get me started. You know, and in that way we are able to use a triggering experience or a traumatic experience for something good for us. But then again, we can say that, oh yeah, trauma happens, just find a way out of it. It also takes strength, it takes resolve, it also takes a community. Yeah.
It does, definitely. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it's also important I think it's so important, the things that you say about making or doing something, taking something constructive and making it into something constructive. Because I think it's really important to remind people that even if you are struggling with mental health issues, it doesn't mean that you're broken, okay? Yeah. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that your life is over. You're never going to be everything that you want it to be. Like, some of the greatest people ever were people who struggled with their mental health. Some of the greatest geniuses were people who struggled with mental health. And some of the greatest people were people who overcome adversity. Sometimes actually, going through these things in life makes you see the things in a different perspective that can help the world and not just yourself, but moving forwards. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So remember that you're not broken just because you're struggling. Yeah.
Totally true. Yeah. On what Noam just said, that what you feel, and it can make you feel really, really bad. But then with time, you learn that, okay, this power of feeling, you can use it into something. So back when I was in high school, I remember that when I was going to apply for Vidregående, I was called into the counseling office, rådgivning. And then there, when she saw what I had applied, studiespecialisering, she told me that this is too hard for you. You're very new for Norway, you can't do it. So
I heard that.
Yeah. And then she told me to apply something else. And then I felt really bad. That was like the first time in my whole life someone doubted on me, on academia, like school was, like my parents never doubted on me to go to school or to have good grades or anything, or anybody. Like, so it was my first time. It was so traumatic. And then I was so scared to choose something bad, to fail. And I didn't know like how the system was here and everything. So then I told her like to give me one day, and then I went home. I talked with my mom and some family, and then I made some phone call with people, with Eritrean fellows who've been living here for a while, and then they were like, no, you can make it. We all have make it like the same way and everything. And I just remember that night, the same night, because the day after I had to give her an answer. So I was sitting, crying, and feeling so bad. But then I was like, okay, this feeling is not going to be for nothing. I'm not just be sitting here and crying for nothing. I'm going to have to do something about it. Because if I say, okay, to change my plan, she is going to think that every other Eritrean kid or every other black kid has to change their mind to that they cannot apply to the specialisering or be something they want to be. So it wasn't only about me, I felt. So then the day after, I was like, okay, I'm going to be super nice. I'm not going to make... I don't know. I had this in my background that, okay, if you're a black lady, I didn't want to be seen like an angry person or something, right? So you have all this burden on you to take care of.
Yeah.
So I went to the office, I remember, and then I was super nice, and I told her, no, you know what? Let's just keep it. If it's the grades that I need, I'm going to work hard for the grades. And I did.
Yeah.
Right? And today I'm a bioengineer, right? So, yeah, just something that I wanted to share with everybody that, traumatic happenings and experience can be actually used for our benefits. And not only us, but for everybody to come behind us, that we can be the representatives for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It doesn't have to shape us or shape our identity.
Definitely, yeah.
I agree.
All right, back to our questions.
Yeah. I think the next one
Yeah.
is you.
Yes. So this question is built on the previous one, that when we were talking about how to build our mental health, going to therapy was so promoted, right? Yeah. So I want to ask this panel if you guys agree on that, eventually what else? And if we're talking about therapy, we want specifically to talk about not any therapy, but like the culturally competent type of therapy. Because we definitely agreed in the previous one that going to a Norwegian therapist that doesn't have any cultural background is just another trauma, right? So that you feel that there were ladies who actually gave their testimony saying that you go there and you feel like you have to educate them. You go there to get help, but then you're the one giving competenza, right? Competency to them. So if we're going to talk about therapy, let's talk about the cultural competence type of therapy. So the first question is, do you guys agree? Does this panel agree on that? And let's continue. All right.
I mean, it's just such a shame that it's such a culture. I know that in the U.S., the culture is very open when it comes to therapy. Here, not so much. I am someone who goes to therapy. I need it. But it's an important thing, you know. I couldn't be a person who studies psychology and I wanted to become a psychologist and not be open about the fact that I also want to go to therapy. How do you can't do that, you know? But yes, I think that, no, actually every psychologist I've ever encountered and therapists have been white people. You know, it really depends on what you're talking about, but now I have a therapist who is a foreigner. She has a thick accent. She's not someone of color. She's a white person, but she's from Eastern Europe. So she has experienced racism, right? So that actually helps when I've talked to her about my experiences and the things that I deal with that are directly connected to the things that I've experienced racially. And also she's female, so she understands my issues as a woman, because there are certain things that a man will never be able to understand because you will never experience it. So I don't care how many books you've written, okay? I don't care which college you went to, it will always be theory to you. To me, it's an experience, right? And that's what's so important, because there's a difference between empathizing and relating.
Exactly.
And relating gives you insight that is so crucial to understanding that when we talk about things like that, like you said, we don't want the added, I have to explain something to you, and then you have that on top of it. I just want to tell you, and you understand me.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So yes, I think it's important, yeah.
But is it a criteria? Like, does the person or does the therapist has to be the same gender? or has to be the same ethnicity, or like what are we looking for when it comes to a therapist? You know,
I
and
mean,
it goes to everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say like competency, obviously, but
Yeah.
but I don't think that you have to be. I just think it helps. You know what I mean? You will encounter people of the same sex, of the same ethnicity, background, whatever, who will not understand you. Because at the end of the day, we're just people. We're individuals. We are that before we're anything else. So you're probably gonna meet someone who has that background, and it didn't help. But the thing is, if you choose someone with that background, you at least know that won't be an obstacle. Because it's already hard enough to find someone that actually works for you. And this is also very important. Don't give up after the first try. You know, sometimes you have to try many times until you find the one that's right for you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So just use it as a guiding tool and not something that you have to do.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. That's my experience.
Good.
Dora?
Yeah, I agree. We definitely need to talk to someone, if it's a psychologist or a psychiatric nurse. There are other people also who kind of have the knowledge about psychiatry and the mental health. So we can choose to talk to a psychologist or to a psychiatric health sister. That's also possible. Yes. So I think it's important to also see the competence, that the person is culturally competent. That's one thing, culturally aware, but that should not be the criteria and a stop to getting help, because you could really find someone who will be genuinely interested in you and will be able to help even more than someone from your ethnic background or from your country. So we shouldn't put that as a criteria, because I've known many people who have gotten help from someone who's not from their own background, but they're genuinely interested.
That's
and as
good.
you have said, sometimes maybe you have to educate them. Tell them how you want to be, how you feel, and maybe like after 2 or 3 times, then they'll be able to understand you better. So I agree with you that we shouldn't give up on the first appointment. Maybe that won't be, as you wish it to be, but don't give up. Just continue, and you might maybe have to educate them as well. Tell them how you do it in your culture and how you experience what you experience. So we shouldn't really give up, and unfortunately there are not so many psychologists, African psychologists in Bergen or in Oslo.
Yeah,
they're
that's
not.
the thing.
So if you have to look for that, it'll take you many years. And if you have to, but that's a reality. So we shouldn't really limit ourselves, and get the help that we need from the person that we can relate to, the person that understands us, and the person that sees us as humans. That's the most important thing. Okay.
We need to actually wrap up for Q&A, but I have one more question, and that is for those who do not choose to go to therapy, like for those who maybe are afraid of going to therapy, and that fear is like the barrier for them actually seeking help, because it might be for various reasons. Either we've heard that many people or many mothers in Norway are very afraid of going to therapy because they're afraid of the children being taken to the child welfare system. And also there are other people who are afraid to go to therapists because of they might be wrongly diagnosed. So like, what are the options for those who do not choose to go to therapy? Yeah.
First of all, I would like to say, as much as a person can bleed, break their hand and the hand bleed and it get bandaged, so are our emotions. I like to give a scenario like that to say we need help. Whenever our emotions are bleeding, we have to attend to them. We have to attend to them. And it's something that we need to get into as Black community, as Black women, to say, it's okay not to be okay. Let's start from there. It's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to say, I think I need help this time. Yes. And if a person feels that they will not want to go for therapy, let's go to how we were raised up. I'm still going back to talking to an auntie. I need somebody that I can talk to. Back then, that's how it was so therapeutic for us. That's how in our communities, the cousins, the uncles, and we even know that back in the days that even when a girl enters puberty, sometimes it wasn't the actual mother talking to her. It was the younger sister to the mother who will sit that girl down and talk life to her. And these are the people that we still have. We may not have them here in Norway with us, but thank God we have technology. We have WhatsApps. We have social media that we can connect with them sometimes where they are. One thing that is important is let's seek help. Somebody's help may be in a religious way. If a person feels that them going to church, talking to the pastor is therapeutic for them, let that person do so. Because definitely it will still help them. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, I was going to comment to the previous question with cultural competence, and now that you have touched on it as well, that when we speak of, or when I understand, the way I understand cultural competence, it of course basic things as maybe the gender of a person or the race they are from or where they are from, because you can be, say for example, a black woman, but you were born and raised in Norway. So there are things you know I don't know, there are things I know you don't know, and there may be clashes in understanding. So it extends also beyond those physical appearances to also beliefs. Do you understand that there are different beliefs? How do you help somebody, say a religious person coming into your office as a therapist, seeking help? How do you address or how do you speak to that strength in them? Because their belief is their strength as well. How do you empower that? So it in some communities, especially the religious, or at least this is my experience, especially the religious sector of our society, we do become incredibly closed to how we define human experience. And we do not often want to admit that it is a human experience. And it was when I was going to ask, I don't know if I have a right to ask, but after all these checkboxes and cultural competence, where does being a human, how do we define you being a human to the other person as a therapist? Because that is, for me, that is fundamental. You can check the boxes, but if you're going to diagnose me, I'm going to feel like I'm talking to a machine. I want a human experience. I want to be felt. I want to be understood. I want to be heard. So how do we measure that?
Yeah.
That's for the next discussion. Yeah. No, you mentioned about the fear of seeking or getting help because of either if you're a parent losing your children, maybe the fear of that as well. Was it one of the question you had?
Yeah, the children going to the, child welfare
Yeah.
system because maybe the mother is too harsh or stuff like
Yeah.
that.
If they see a therapist, that they might be, getting themselves involved in the system.
Yeah.
That how much will they be sharing with the system?
Yeah.
Because going to therapy and then not being able to share what you want to share is no point on going to therapy, right?
That fear is there. It's a genuine fear, but then it's also a limitation to the help that you would get, because many parents, unfortunately, you see that they need help. They are struggling mentally, but then they don't seek help because they think if they do that, they will risk losing their children. But in the course of not seeking help, your condition worsens, and then you are not capable of taking care of your children because then you are not in the place of fulfilling your role as a parent, and that will also cause problems,
Yeah.
you know. So we really need to look at mental awareness is one thing, being aware of your mental health, and then seeking help as early as possible. Because I also work in the child welfare services,
Yeah.
so I have this hat now. We do help parents who need help because we are a service that is there for the children and for the family. So to be able to take care of the children, so we make sure that the families also have it well. So that's how we get to help them to get help, and then they can help their children. But then because the fear, because of also not knowing what the child welfare services is, and we hear a lot about things also that have happened, unfortunately, that makes this fear even stronger.
Yeah.
So we need to work on that as well. But the fear is there. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I think it's a wrap for today. Thank you so much. And now we go to the last
Yes.
session with the Q&A.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions.
Yeah. If there are too many, we can just, people can ask us, right? If there are too many, then it would be Michael going around with the microphone and people asking orally.
Okay. How does having this conversation around race, gender, and mental health in English rather than Norwegian shape the way we're thinking about these issues?
Interesting.
Is the question, Stefano?
I would say, being someone that doesn't speak Norwegian, of course, and also has a bit of understanding of Norwegian, language is a very important factor into how we define anything. In my language, for example, there is no depression. So there's no way I'm going to know of depression until I'm familiar with English and everything that goes on in the language. And being here, then that means I'm an English speaker. Talking to a Norwegian about my mental health, of which I did once, and I've already heard that I shouldn't give up, but I was just like, okay, not doing it again. Because I expressed something to her. It was about relationships. And she was taken aback about what I had to say. I didn't know how to express that same thing or explain to her in Norwegian if it would have sounded different to her to be receptive to what I had to say and how it affected my mental health. So language, my point is, language is a barrier to how we understand social issues, to how we speak to them, and the vocabulary in the language. How wide is it? How narrow is it? How specific is it? Is also a barrier. So it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And also, language reflects culture.
Exactly.
So like Nomtaba said, with that you don't have the term for depression in your language, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But in your culture, obviously there haven't been the context for it to be put into words, right? So, and in this, I'm not really, the reason why I was like, because I wasn't really, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I feel like because English is sadly a lingua franca because of the colonization. So this is the way that we can communicate and make sure that everyone is included into the conversation.
Yeah, and since this is an ISUB event, I feel like I have to say something on this. So we chose to do the events in English because this is a conversation within us. This is not a conversation for the Norwegian society to learn, but this is for us to learn from each other, meaning that with the culture, with the language barrier, we have in African Students Union, we have many exchange students that doesn't understand Norwegian. So we do it in English, just to answer it very quick. So next question.
Okay. You've mentioned talking to professionals or therapists. How do you navigate talking to professionals in Norway where race and racism are often seen as taboo?
Yeah.
When racism is seen as taboo.
Yeah, when it's seen as taboo.
Again, the question.
Can you repeat?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sure.
You've mentioned talking to professionals or therapists. How do you navigate talking to professionals in Norway where race and racism are often seen as taboo?
Yeah. I mean,
Nobody?
I guess.
I think it's important that, like both Dora and I said, I mean, a good therapist can come in any shape or form. It's just that if you try to find someone who has a similar background to you, whether it's ethnically or their sex or whatever, that will probably help, but it's not a guarantee. But obviously, if you ever encounter a therapist who does not understand you and the things that you're experiencing, which are very real. Racism is very real. Sexism is very real. Whatever you're struggling, it's very real. So if you ever encounter a therapist who is essentially gaslighting is basically making you doubt your own reality, your own perception of reality. And if you're experiencing someone who doesn't have the same background as you, who's saying, well, are you sure that's racism? You know what? Bye. You are there to get better, not to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Know what I mean? And unfortunately, we live in, don't misconstrue me, we live in a majority white country, so most of the therapists will be white.
Yeah.
But fortunately, now we see a lot more, there are more generations, my generations have become psychologists and therapists, so I know of people who have an immigrant background or who are ethnic minorities who are psychologists. So there are people out there, just don't give up, fight for yourself. Don't give up after the first one or the second one, for that sake. Like Dora said, sometimes it can take years until you find the best therapist, but you're worth it, But don't take any from anyone,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Rafała?
I still go back to how I elaborated relating mental health to physical health. That as much as we can get hurt and we need help in our physical health and we go and see a medical doctor, so are our emotions whenever we need to attend to them. When you go and see a physician and you have a cut, they keep on bandaging it and it doesn't get better, you go and seek second opinion. So as is mental health. It's okay to change therapists
Yeah.
because you feel that, no, this one is not assisting me enough. Don't feel that when you have gone to one, you have to be stuck there all the time.
Yes.
Hey, just like in case you get a bandage and then you see that, no, now I'm about to lose my hand, it's going to be amputated, let me seek second opinion. So as is mental health. Yeah, because sometimes you get stuck and you stay in there, you're going to get more damage than get help.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
true. This is
Yeah.
very true.
Very true.
Next.
Yeah. About the trauma, how do you see the trauma that parents go through affect their children, even though they've never been experienced that same trauma?
The trauma that
I can read that again.
resonate.
About the trauma, how do you see the trauma that parents go through affect their children, even though they've never experienced that same trauma?
Yeah.
Our parents' trauma affecting
I get
us.
It does. It does a lot, and it's because as children, the parents, it kind of affects also our how we practice our role as parents. For instance, parents who have experienced war, traumatic experiences from war, and you don't sleep at night or you get triggered by things that happen. The children, of course, they see that the parent is afraid of maybe. Like for me, I don't like fireworks. That's something. It relates to some experiences from war. I haven't taken my children out in town when there's fireworks because definitely I will get triggered and then it can affect them. So I explain to them why I don't like that. But then also for us parents to be aware of the things that trigger our experiences of trauma, because then if a parent who has experienced some trauma, it will definitely play over to the children, because you either be overprotective about your children because you're afraid of leaving them in the playground thinking something bad will happen to them, and that will definitely play on the children. The children will also be afraid to go out alone. So of course, such experiences will also be passed on to children.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And a lot of us become the parents we said that we're not going to become.
Yeah.
Like, I will never do that.
Yeah.
Next minute, that's exactly what you're doing. So I think it's about recognizing that as well.
Yeah.
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 Just adding to what Dora was saying, I think fear is a big factor. We can really put fear on our children when we don't know that we're doing it. So I will react to something. My daughter will see me react to something. I don't know that I'm reacting to something. I don't know that she's seeing me reacting to something. And the next thing I see her exhibiting that same behavior. And I'm wondering, why is she doing that? But that's because, so we always have to, as parents, if we don't have that awareness of our own issues and our own traumas and the things that we need to deal with, we just nicely transmit them onto our kids. And then we see those same behaviors perpetuating themselves. And if that cycle is not broken, it'll just keep going. So I think really fear is one of the biggest things that we need to deal with, and we need to be aware of how it manifests in the different things. That sometimes it's just small things that you're not aware of, but it's just picked up like this by your kids, and then they will do the same thing because they'll see that there's something there. That means I need to feel the same thing that she's feeling, even though they don't know the backstory of what caused it. So I think awareness is, again, back to that word, is a very important thing.
Yeah. So now we have...
Just a question. Since we are talking about fear, and we're talking about... Hello? Since we're talking about fear, and we're talking about mental health, there's something called fear of missing out when it comes to social medias. Could you guys please share your ideas about the impact of using social medias and mental health?
Social media.
I think, social media plays a big role in how we have on our mental health. Yeah, and it's also this thing of awareness, It's like if you're aware of yourself, of your mental health and your life and what triggers you, then you know how being on social media, what if it's something that you are like with your self-esteem, if you put out a picture there and you don't get the likes that you expected to get, then if that plays on your own self-esteem, thinking that, okay, maybe I'm not good enough, I don't look okay, I have to do other things more to get my likes, then it will affect your mental health. But again, we see it how, especially on young people, how many people get bullied on social media because of either they are not included in their groups or they feel themselves excluded from their friends' network. And by being bullied on social media, then you feel that you are not good enough, and that also plays on how you present yourself among your friends, especially with kids. I remember in my child's class, we had to discuss about how long children have to be online and what social media platforms they should be on, and also be aware of what the messages your children send to others. Because especially young people, we see that mentally they are really being disturbed through the social media because of the messages that they get and also how they relate to each other. So, and we, even the grown-ups, we see many people are very addicted to the social media and how we use it and what we communicate and the feedback that we get back. So it's also, I think it's more about self-awareness, where you get your likes from. Is it from within yourself or from external, from people? And how does that also play on your life? So it's something that we have to know. But of course, it plays a big role in people's life. Yeah.
Next.
Okay. That was actually the last question. because we need to wrap it up. Yes, Michael is nodding. However, we have a real good question here, and that is, do Black women raised in Africa view mental health differently than Black women raised in the West?
This is a very good one.
Let's just make it short.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess being raised in Africa, we wouldn't be talking so much about therapists like Anina, right? Because, hey, really, where was a therapist? Sorry, I called you out. Because, for example, we would say, well, white people go to therapists, you know. We don't do stuff like that. You talk to your aunt or... That's the thing, you know, what I said earlier is that, and this, of course, has changed, like Rafil was said, is that we did have that support structure. So for us, for example, I'm from Zimbabwe, and in my culture, we would go to the paternal aunt. Those are the ones that you would talk to. Those are the ones that advised you. Those are the ones that kind of told you and taught you, especially once you came into puberty, told you about life and what to expect and the difficulties and how to deal with things. There was this advising, you know, this counseling that we had. So there was no need to go, in a way, outside. And of course, the family is big, right? It's very extended. There was no need to really go out there. I'm not saying that these aunts were perfect. Some of them were really not, and their advice was really not good. But you know, that's kind of what was there. That's kind of what we grew up with.
Yeah.
And I think now there is a vacuum. There is a vacuum because I'm an aunt, but I'm not there. You know, so who do my nieces talk to?
Yeah.
I try, you know, on WhatsApp, but it's not the same. You don't have the same connection because you haven't been there since they were small. And the context is different, and everything has changed so much.
Yeah.
So they might be more likely to go to a therapist than we would have, for example. I don't know what these guys...
Yeah, you feel
I just came to Norway last year, September. So I've been in Africa, Botswana all this time. Patterns have changed. We are seeing people now opening up and going to therapy. And we are seeing people now, you know, I don't know how many times a lot of people even call me to say, I know you can help me. Let's talk about this. That sometimes I will even talk to them and even refer them. And it's amazing how nowadays they can notice to say, you know what, I need help. And thank God our medical aid as well nowadays is able to cover for some sessions for therapy, because it used not to. Medical aid used to just be used for physical illness and not on mental health. So nowadays the context is shifting. People are noticing the importance of taking care of their mental states. Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Well, I came to Norway 5-6 years ago. So there's this thing of feeling that I have grown weaker because now I feel things that I know I would have otherwise not felt before. I have, in a sense, it is also a privilege to not have to worry. Let's say, for example, now, what's the time? It's late. I don't have to worry about transport, though. So I can sit here and have that conversation. Something as simple as that. But for a woman my age, back home, her worries and her to-do lists are incredibly different. So it's like now I can focus on how I feel, when maybe before I hadn't had the time to notice how I feel. You're alive, you're dressed, you went to school, good grades, great. You don't have problems. So even now that I'm aware of some mental health issues and also my own mental health journey, I still know I can't talk to most people about it back home until they get to a point that they also are going through something and they're willing to go there in their own journey. So I do feel I've grown weaker, but also I question that, I challenge that to say, no, I have actually grown stronger now because now I know why I used to be this way, or I know why I'm acting this way, and now I have the power, or I'm empowered to challenge some of the things I feel or some of the worldviews I've had.
Very good.
Okay, that was the last one. It was perfect. And all of you are perfect. You want to wrap it up? I can do it. Okay. Thank you so much, all of you. You're amazing. And I hope the audience took a lot out of it. I hope you all took some notes, because I did. And then, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us, for the whole panel, for the beautiful women that we have. We're so thankful that you guys are in Bergen. Y'all, all of them live in Bergen, so anything is just approaching something.
You can locate
Yeah, also thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you so much for being part of the event. We are the African Students Union. You can find us everywhere on the social media. Be part of us. We love y'all.
Thank you for organizing.
Pleasure.